I was standing in the middle of my own kitchen, clutching a past-due mortgage notice, while the woman who had just drained our joint savings account sat on my velvet sofa, leisurely painting her toenails. That woman wasn't my husband's mistress. It was his 30-year-old sister, Chloe. And when I turned to my husband, Mark, begging for him to finally set a boundary, he looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would ultimately end our marriage. Before we continue, if you are new on my channel, please click on the subscribe button, like this video, comment where you are listening from, and share with your friends. Let's continue. If you have ever felt like a ghost in your own home, invisible to the person who vowed to love you above all others, then you know exactly why I packed my bags that night. Our story started like an American dream. Mark and I had just closed on a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial home in the quiet suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. We were in our early 30s, deeply in love, and ready to start a family. But the ink on our mortgage was barely dry when the phone rang. It was Chloe. She had lost her apartment in Chicago, had nowhere else to go, and needed a place to crash for a few weeks while she got back on her feet. I should have known then. Mark had a deeply ingrained savior complex when it came to his younger sister. They had lost their parents when Chloe was a teenager, and Mark had stepped into the parental role. I respected his loyalty, I really did, but I didn't realize that in Mark's hierarchy of love, his wife would forever be relegated to second place. A few weeks seamlessly bled into 6 months. Chloe didn't arrive with just a suitcase. She arrived with a sense of entitlement that suffocated the air in our home. She took over the master guest room, demanding we upgrade the mattress because her back hurt. She quit her remote job 2 weeks after moving in, claiming the vibe didn't align with her mental health. Suddenly, I was the sole breadwinner, working 50-hour weeks at an advertising firm, while Mark's income as a high school principal barely covered the sudden spike in our household expenses. The financial drain was astronomical, but the emotional toll was worse. Chloe treated me not as a sister-in-law, but as the live-in help. She would leave towers of crusted dishes in the sink, use my expensive skincare products until the jars were scraped hollow, and blast the television at 2 a.m. When I tried to speak to her about it, she would look at me with large, innocent eyes, and within minutes, Mark would be pulling me aside. "Linda, come on," he would whisper fiercely in the hallway. "You know she's had a hard time. She's fragile right now. Just let it go. Please, for me." I let it go. And then I let it go again. And again. I swallowed my frustration every time I found a charge on our credit card for designer shoes or expensive brunches, funded by the allowance Mark secretly gave her from our joint account. I smiled tightly when she insulted my cooking, telling Mark, "It's a shame Linda doesn't know how to make Mom's pot roast. This is so dry." But the subtle digs soon turned into blatant attempts to assert dominance over our household. Chloe began rearranging the furniture in our living room while I was at work. She threw away a handmade quilt my grandmother had given me, claiming it clashed with the aesthetic she was trying to create for the house. When I burst into tears over the lost heirloom, Mark actually had the audacity to sigh, rub his temples, and say, "Linda, it's just a blanket. I'll buy you a new one." Stop making Chloe feel unwelcome in her own home. Her own home. The words echoed in my ears long after the argument ended. It was in that chilling moment I realized I was fighting a battle I had already lost. I wasn't Mark's partner. I was just the woman funding the lifestyle he wanted to provide for his sister. The true unraveling of our marriage happened on a crisp Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year after Chloe had moved in. I had just landed the biggest promotion of my career. To celebrate, I invited 3 of my closest friends and colleagues over for a quiet dinner party. I had spent the entire weekend preparing, buying premium steaks, fine wine, and deep cleaning the house. I had explicitly asked Mark and Chloe to respect the evening. Mark promised he would keep things smooth. When I arrived home from work at 5:30 p.m., ready to start cooking, I walked into a scene of absolute chaos. The front door was wide open. Hip-hop music was vibrating through the floorboards. The kitchen, my pristine, carefully prepped kitchen, was destroyed. There were empty liquor bottles on the granite countertops, spills across the hardwood, and a group of 5 strangers doing shots in our dining room. Chloe was sitting on the island counter, laughing loudly. When she saw me, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, hey, Linda. We decided to pregame here before heading downtown. We used those steaks in the fridge. Hope you don't mind. They were expiring soon anyway." My blood ran cold. The $150 worth of prime cuts I had bought for my dinner party were charred to a crisp on plates scattered around the room. I looked for Mark. He was in the backyard, casually talking to one of Chloe's friends. I marched outside, my hands shaking with a rage so profound it felt like ice in my veins. "Mark, get them out. Now." He blinked at me, surprised. "Linda, chill out. They're just having a few drinks before they leave. It's not a big deal." "My colleagues are arriving in an hour," I screamed, the facade finally cracking. "She ruined the dinner. She destroyed the house. Mark, you promised me." Instead of apologizing, instead of kicking the strangers out of our home, Mark's face hardened. He stepped closer to me, his voice dropping into a condescending whisper. "Do not embarrass my sister in front of her friends. You are acting crazy. Just order some pizzas for your work friends. Chloe is allowed to have guests." I stared at the man I had married, the man who had promised to protect me, cherish me, and build a life with me. I saw nothing but a stranger who would gladly set me on fire to keep his sister warm. "She comes first, right?" I whispered, my voice trembling, not from sadness, but from a terrifying, absolute clarity. "She's family, Linda. She comes first," he replied, crossing his arms. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The overwhelming exhaustion of fighting for a place in my own marriage simply washed over me, leaving nothing but cold resolve. I walked back inside, ignored Chloe's smug smirk as she watched me pass, and walked straight up to our bedroom. I pulled out my largest suitcase and packed everything that mattered: clothes, my laptop, my remaining jewelry, and my important documents. As I rolled the suitcase down the stairs, Mark finally realized what was happening. Panic flashed in his eyes. He abandoned his drink and rushed toward me. "Linda, what are you doing? Are you seriously throwing a tantrum over some steaks?" "I'm not throwing a tantrum, Mark," I said, opening the front door. "I'm leaving. You and Chloe can have the house. You clearly don't need a wife when you have her." I drove away that night, checking into an extended stay hotel, turning my phone off, and letting the tears finally fall. The next 6 months were the hardest, yet most liberating, of my life. I filed for divorce. Mark fought it initially, leaving me dozens of voicemails, oscillating between furious accusations that I was abandoning him to desperate pleas for me to return. I ignored them all, communicating only through my lawyer. I secured a beautiful, sunlit apartment downtown, entirely my own. The silence of my new home was healing. Nobody criticized my cooking. Nobody drained my bank account. But while I was rebuilding my peace, Mark's world was violently burning to the ground. Without my income, the financial reality of their lifestyle crashed down on Mark. My lawyer discovered during the discovery phase of our divorce that within 2 months of my departure, Mark had maxed out his personal credit cards to keep up with the mortgage and Chloe's spending habits. But Chloe, true to her nature, wasn't grateful. When the money dried up, her behavior escalated. Through mutual friends, I heard the horrifying updates. Chloe had started hosting massive parties every weekend. She alienated Mark's neighbors, resulting in multiple noise complaints and a visit from the local police. The final blow came just a week before our divorce was finalized. Mark called me from a new number, bypassing my block. When I answered, I didn't recognize the hollow, broken voice on the other end. "Linda, Please don't hang up, Mark sobbed. The sound of a grown man crying so openly made my breath catch. What do you want, Mark? You were right, he choked out. You were right about everything. She destroyed it all. The story poured out of him in a torrent of grief and panic. Mark had gone out of town for a principal's conference. While he was gone, Chloe had thrown a rager that spun completely out of control. Her friends had trashed the house. The drywall was punched in. The hardwood floors were deeply gouged. And the custom kitchen cabinets we had painstakingly picked out together were ripped off their hinges. Worse, Chloe had found the spare keys to Mark's newly leased SUV and let a friend drive it to a liquor store. The friend had totaled it, entirely uninsured. When Mark returned home to the devastation and finally screamed at Chloe, demanding she take responsibility, she had simply rolled her eyes, packed her bags, and left. She told him he was toxic and stifling her energy, and she moved out to crash with a new boyfriend, blocking Mark's number. She left me, Linda. Mark wept through the phone. I'm facing foreclosure. My car is gone. I have $60,000 in credit card debt. I gave up the best thing that ever happened to me for someone who didn't even care if I lived or died. I'm so sorry. Please, let me see you. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. I sat on my balcony, looking out over the city skyline. The sunset was painting the clouds in brilliant shades of pink and gold. I felt a pang of profound sadness for him, for the life we could have had, for the love that was wasted, but I felt absolutely no desire to save him. Mark, I said softly, you built a castle and handed her the keys. You can't be mad that she burned it down. Linda, please. I loved you, I interrupted, my voice steady and resolute. I loved you enough to build a life with you, but you demanded I make myself small so your sister could feel big. You made your choice every single day for a year. I'm finally making mine. What am I supposed to do? He whispered, sounding like a lost, terrified little boy. You're going to have to save yourself this time, I replied. Goodbye, Mark. I ended the call, blocked the new number, and set my phone face down on the table. The legal paperwork was signed 3 days later. I didn't get the house, but I got something infinitely more valuable. My freedom, my self-respect, and a future where I would never again settle for being second best in my own life. The first year after the divorce was a masterclass in unlearning. When you spend years shrinking yourself to accommodate someone else's ego and their family's toxicity, you forget how much space you're actually allowed to take up. At first, I walked around my new downtown apartment like a ghost. I would hesitate before buying a nice bottle of wine, a phantom voice in my head whispering that the money should be saved for one of Chloe's emergencies. I would wake up in a panic at 2 a.m., expecting to hear the booming bass of a house party downstairs. But there was only silence. Beautiful, uninterrupted, healing silence. I channeled all my leftover anxiety into my work. The promotion I had earned on that disastrous night of the ruined dinner party was just the beginning. Without the exhausting second job of managing Mark's emotions and Chloe's disasters, my mind was sharp. I spearheaded a national campaign for a major tech client, and within 18 months, I was made a junior partner at the firm. With the new title came a new salary, and I finally bought a place of my own, a gorgeous, modern townhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a chef's kitchen. When I furnished it, I didn't compromise. I bought the plush cream rugs I wanted, the fragile crystal vases, and yes, a beautiful, hand-stitched quilt that lay safely at the foot of my bed. Nobody was going to throw it away. Nobody was going to tell me my taste was wrong. I started dating casually, but I was fiercely protective of my peace. I realized that my marriage to Mark hadn't just been destroyed by his sister. It had been destroyed by his profound cowardice. I promised myself I would never again be with a man who couldn't stand up for me. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard murmurs about Mark. the foreclosure on our marital home had gone through. His credit was obliterated. He had stepped down from his role as a high school principal and taken a lower-paying administrative job in a different district. Overwhelmed by the stress and the debt, I felt a brief flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the overwhelming reality of my own happiness. I had survived. More than that, I was thriving. You would think that after completely detonating her brother's life and my marriage, Chloe would have the self-awareness to disappear forever. But toxic entitlement knows no bounds. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, almost 2.5 years after I had walked out of that house. I was sitting in my glass-walled office, reviewing a contract, when my phone buzzed. It was a message on LinkedIn. I clicked the notification and felt my jaw physically drop. Chloe, seeking new opportunities. Hey Linda, long time no see. Hope you're doing well. I saw on here that you made partner at your agency. Congrats. That's huge. Look, I'm in a bit of a tight spot. My roommate situation just fell through. Total nightmare. People are so toxic these days. I'm looking to relocate downtown and saw you bought a place near the arts district. Any chance you have a spare room I could rent for a few weeks until I find my own place? Or maybe your firm is hiring? Let's grab coffee. XOXO. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring for a second. The absolute, unmitigated audacity. She had ruined my home, insulted me, drained my finances, and left her own brother in financial ruin when the money stopped flowing. And here she was, asking to move into my new home and get a job at my company. The old Linda, the wife who wanted to keep the peace, who wanted to be seen as accommodating and kind, might have felt a spike of adrenaline or guilt. The new Linda just started laughing. It was a deep belly laugh that startled my assistant walking past my door. It was the laugh of a woman who was finally completely untouched by the madness of her past. I didn't feel angry. I just felt an overwhelming sense of validation. Mark had sacrificed everything for a woman who viewed other people purely as stepping stones and ATMs. I didn't block her immediately. I took 60 seconds to type out a response, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Chloe, my home and my agency require a level of respect and accountability that you have thoroughly demonstrated you do not possess. Do not ever contact me again. I hit send, blocked her profile, and went back to my contract. My heart rate hadn't even elevated. Closure rarely happens the way it does in the movies. There are usually no dramatic apologies in the pouring rain, but sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need to finally close the book. It happened at a sterile, brightly lit grocery store on a Sunday morning. I was in the produce aisle, squeezing avocados, wearing a cashmere sweater and a pair of tailored jeans, feeling rested and content. Linda? I froze. I knew that voice. I turned slowly, and there stood Mark, the breath caught in my throat, not out of longing, but out of shock. He looked 10 years older than the man I had married. His hairline had receded dramatically. There were deep, dark bags under his eyes, and his posture was slumped. He was holding a basket with a loaf of cheap bread, some sliced cheese, and a frozen dinner. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice level. "Hello." He stared at me, his eyes wide, taking in my appearance, the expensive clothes, the relaxed posture, the distinct lack of the exhaustion that used to permanently line my face when we were married. "You look incredible," he breathed, his voice cracking slightly. "You look so happy." "I am," I said simply. I didn't offer a polite, "How are you?" because I didn't want to open the door to his trauma. But he pushed it open anyway. "I messed up, Linda. God, I messed up so bad. I live in a studio apartment out by the highway now. I'm still digging myself out of the bankruptcy." He paused, swallowing hard, looking down at his worn sneakers. "I haven't spoken to Chloe in 2 years. She stole my laptop to pawn it, and I finally cut her off. You were right about her. You were right about everything. He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, silently begging for something. Forgiveness? Absolution? A second chance? I looked at the man who had repeatedly thrown me to the wolves to protect the wolf. I realized I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. I just felt a profound, heavy sorrow for the life he had chosen to destroy. I'm sorry you had to learn the hard way, Mark, I said softly, but firmly. But I'm glad you finally set a boundary. Do you think? He hesitated, taking a half step forward. Do you think we could ever get coffee? Just to catch up? I looked him dead in the eye, feeling the solid, unshakable ground of my new life beneath my feet. No, Mark, we can't. I offered him a small, polite smile, the kind you give a stranger. Take care of yourself. I turned my shopping cart around and walked away toward the floral department to buy myself a massive bouquet of fresh lilies. I didn't look back. As the automatic sliding doors of the grocery store opened and I stepped out into the bright, warm sunshine, I took a deep breath of fresh air. The ghost was finally gone. The castle was mine. And this time, I was the only one holding the keys.